Good afternoon. Let's do some business. We are doing it live right here, doing more at 4 weekday afternoons. We get right down to business with the news-driven hour after Ben Shapiro and just before the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang at 5. Yep, Mottek On Money, live on the air, 790 KBC, streaming live online worldwide at kbc.com. And your on-demand Mottek On Money podcast, kbc.com, Apple, iTunes, all your favorite podcast platforms. Well, it was liftoff instead of let down today for the stock market, helped by shares of Boeing, which moved higher after the successful launch today at the Kennedy Space Center of the Boeing Starliner spacecraft carrying 2 astronauts to the International Space Station. Boeing shares moving up $1.23 to $189 and change. NVIDIA shooting to the moon, a record high above 1,200 today. The S&P 500 and NASDAQ both ending at record highs as NVIDIA's market cap topped the $3 trillion mark for the first time. NVIDIA up more than 5% above $1,224 a share. The Dow came in for a closing gain of 96 points, settling at 38,807. The S&P 500 up 63, selling at a record high at 5,354. That was the 25th record high close we've seen so far this year. And the NASDAQ finished higher with a gain of 331 points. The star of the day, finishing at 17,188. Its 13th record high of the year. Stocks and bonds have been rallying lately as investors take in a couple of economic reports out today that showed a slowdown in hiring and a stronger than expected rebound in the services sector of the economy. All three of the major averages moved higher today as Treasury yields extended their decline. The yield in the 10-year note has been pulling back lately, and that's been impacting the real estate stocks, which have been in rally mode. The yield in the 10-year note moving to 4.30%. Back to NVIDIA now, the so-called Magnificent One, worth more than Apple now, becoming the second largest U.S. company behind Microsoft. The chip giant now has a market cap of $3.01 trillion. Shares moving higher today. It's a first finish in the exclusive $3 trillion market cap club. Apple, by the way, no slouch either, did move higher to give the company a closing market value of $3 trillion, exactly its first close at or above that mark since January. We did see Apple move up $1.52 today to $195 and change. Well, it was a big day for Boeing with the Starliner spacecraft blasting off on its first astronaut mission, a years in the making flight that the company and the NASA, National Aeronautics and Space Administration, had delayed several times, but no disappointment today. The space capsule carrying a couple astronauts, Barry Wilmore and Sunita Williams, launching today out of the Kennedy Space Center. And the launch marked a major step forward for that program, which had been slowed by repeated technical glitches, which had been taking a financial toll on Boeing. Boeing stock did close higher today to just shy of $190 a share. The price of oil settling higher today with prices recovering a portion of earlier losses after a 5-session decline. Crude oil in New York moving up nearly $1 to settle at $74.07. Brent crude in London, the global benchmark, up also nearly $1 at $78.41 a barrel. Meanwhile, tensions are escalating on the Israel-Lebanon border now as the Israeli military warned it was preparing to launch a large-scale attack in the north to deter the Iran-backed Islamist group Hezbollah. New report on tipping. Consumers getting burned out on all these tipping options and tipping robots and computers. I'll talk about that with Ted Rossman today, Bankrate senior industry analyst, who will be joining me live later this hour. And another restaurant chain is closing nearly 50 locations here in California following California's minimum wage hike and other pressures on the restaurant business. I'll talk about what's happening with the fantastic Angela Marsden, small business hero here in Southern California, owner of the Pineapple Hill Saloon and Grill in Sherman Oaks. But first, on your money, the markets, the economy, today's record-shattering performance, and the whole works. Joining us live now, Gabriel Wisdom, Managing Director at American Money Management, based right here in Southern California, and also author of Wisdom on Value Investing. Gabriel Wisdom, thank you very much for taking the call here this afternoon.
My pleasure, Frank. You know, it's notable that in the last 4 trading sessions now, the stock market has been soft at the opening and then finishes with a gain. Pretty substantial gains, as a matter of fact. And what that tells us is that professional money, institutional money, is coming into the market. It's an institutional accumulation. Now, since 1927, when we had a difficult prior month, 11 out of 11 times the market was higher since 1927. Well, we know last month was pretty difficult. This data comes from Thomas Lee at Fundstrat, but I think it's very, very interesting that institutions now are in an accumulation phase for stocks. And by the way, there's $6 trillion on the sidelines, so there's a lot of money looking for a home.
All right, let's talk about the Magnificent One, still on a roll. NVIDIA up more than $60 today at $1,224 and change. What about NVIDIA here?
Well, NVIDIA has announced, Frank, that they're going to split their stock 10 for 1. The 10 for 1 split happens this Friday, and stock splits usually attract a lot more interest because not only individual investors, but portfolio managers get a more bite-sized unit of the company that they can add to portfolios. I think that might be part of what's going on. NVIDIA's data center revenue in the most recent quarter was up some 427% year over year. That's remarkable. But, you know, they've got competition. They're not the only game in town. AMD, Advanced Micro Devices, and Intel, they're pushing strongly toward their own AI chips. Their goal is to out NVIDIA, and they've got next generation platforms that are pretty exciting. In addition, NVIDIA's biggest customers that are driving all this revenue growth are the tech monsters, Amazon, you know, the so-called mega companies. Google, Meta's a big customer, Microsoft, Tesla, and they want to come up with their own AI offerings as well. So this is a good example of how the free markets provide an advantage. Price competition is coming.
On the air live with Money Manager Gabriel Wisdom with American Money Management. Of course, NVIDIA leading the Magnificent Seven charge. It looks like all the Mag 7 stocks had a great day today. Right down the line here. What about that whole sector here? Even Tesla moving higher today. We see Apple in on today's rally. Microsoft popping nearly $8 higher to $4.24. Google higher. Let's see. We got Meta and Amazon also higher. Any thoughts about the whole group here now?
Well, there's been I'd say a change in the wind direction for the so-called Magnificent Seven companies, not because they're doing poorly, it's just because they became so expensive in terms of the value, the overall market capitalization or value of the enterprise relative to the revenue and earnings expectations. These are great companies, and clearly the market recognizes this, but any little blip in artificial intelligence spending, and you'll see swift punishment on this group. So a lot of institutional money now is going into the other names that have been left behind. And I mean, these are still magnificent companies. There's 7 of them. There's clearly one big leader in NVIDIA, but I think this market is going to see a lot broader participation.
Finally, some good news for Boeing on that launch, a successful launch today out of the Kennedy Space Center of the Starliner. Boeing stock moving up more than $1 back to $189 and change. What about Boeing here after all of its difficulties?
Boeing is a great example of one of the great opportunities to buy when companies have what we like to call a recoverable calamity of sorts. It could be an accounting irregularity. In Boeing's case, it was a problem with a door on a transport jet. They've had other issues as well, but this is, if not a monopoly, it's certainly a duopoly, and very difficult to get into this business. I think now with a space shuttle envisioned for them and competition maybe with Elon Musk's operation, Boeing seems attractive here.
All right, and new attention on the so-called meme stocks, especially GameStop, which rallied today nearly 20% again, up more than $5 at 31 and change on this new mania, GameStop and AMC and some of the other meme names I've seen. What about this latest craze here?
Well, Frank, you know, this is pure gambling, and this fellow who's helping stoke the mania, he calls himself Roaring Kitty. he kickstarted this meme stock frenzy several years ago. I think it was 2021. And as a result, companies that would otherwise be walking dead have been able to raise a good deal of money by selling additional shares. GameStop, for example, raised almost $1 billion from its latest equity offering. AMC Entertainment, the theater chain, capitalized on this meme frenzy. They raised some $250 million through the sale of additional shares. So, hopefully these hot tips from Roaring Kitty won't result in burnt fingers.
On the air live with money manager Gabriel Wisdom. And what about oil? We see the latest reports in the Middle East. Looks like a new front might be opening soon there in the war between Israel and Hamas and Hezbollah. We see oil did tick higher today after its recent slide. What do you see ahead on that front?
Goldman Sachs now is predicting that the global gas market is likely to grow some 50% by 2029. That's only a few years off. And the big mover will be liquid natural gas. They're expecting interest in LNG to rise about 80%. And the U.S. is the major exporter in this. And Goldman says that'll continue into the foreseeable future. What we're seeing in response to all the political resistance to traditional oil and gas and energy companies is a merger mania. For example, ConocoPhillips is acquiring Marathon Oil. That's a shale producer. ExxonMobil has purchased Pioneer Natural Resources. Chevron's got a big deal pending with the Hess Corporation. Occidental has a $12 billion acquisition of Crown Rock, a shale producer. So, the political environment isn't punishing these companies. It's turning them into monopolies.
All right, turning to the economy, we did get that ADP report on the job front today showing job growth in the month of May saw a big drop. We'll be getting the weekly jobless claims numbers tomorrow. And then, of course, the big enchilada of monthly economic reports, the monthly jobs report we get from the Labor Department. They'll be coming out an hour ahead of the opening bell on Friday. What do you see ahead for the rest of the week on these important ratings?
Well, we've seen signs of a strong labor market, Frank. It's not red hot, but it's softening, and this is what the Federal Reserve would like to see it in order to lower interest rates a bit. If they do reduce the cost of money, it won't be by much in my view. But the big declines in jobs have been in healthcare, interestingly, down some 204,000 jobs, food service down 97,000 jobs, and technology down 43,000 jobs. So these reports coming out, especially Friday's report, are going to be very, very big news.
All right. On the crypto front, we've seen Bitcoin rally lately around above $70,000 once again. Ethereum been getting a lot of attention lately because of the possibility of Ethereum ETFs. So let me pull up the latest here. Looks like Bitcoin's back above 71,000 now at 71,240. Ethereum at 3,848. Doge has been around 16 cents lately. Any thoughts about what's happening in the crypto world?
Well, it's very interesting, Frank. There have been some signs that the government is starting to change its tune on the U.S. digital asset market. Wisconsin, for example, the state of Wisconsin purchased around $163 million worth of a Bitcoin ETF last quarter. Institutions and pension funds are getting interested. Also, there's a crypto super PAC, something between 150 million and 250 million that politicians have been able to attract. So this pro-crypto rhetoric that we're starting to hear is becoming increasingly bipartisan, and I think it's very interesting.
That is very interesting. I know you speak at various conferences, pension-oriented conferences for SACers, for example, and some of the other big groups that focus on pension management and so forth. So that's very interesting. Is the view coming around on cryptos and our pensions, in fact, dipping their toes into cryptos now?
Well, the big one, the legislation that everybody in the banking world and financial services, I think, too, that was looking at is this Financial Innovation and Technology for the 21st Century Act, the so-called FIT 21 bill. If that gets approved, this will allow the big banks especially to get involved in sales and trading of crypto, and that would be a very big move for crypto. Now, interestingly, this is supposed to be the asset that's unregulated and totally free of regulation. Well, now we're finding that it's really just another commodity. It has value, which changes rapidly, but it's a commodity.
On there live with money manager Gabriel Wisdom, and any specific places at this point, Gabriel Wisdom, where you will be putting money now and or taking it off the table?
Well, Frank, the AI chips and data centers thing is it's a brand new wave. It reminds me of the internet deflationary boom that occurred in the late 90s. We were able to accomplish far more work by doing less work with the internet, and now Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, for example, which was split off from Hewlett-Packard several years ago, looks to me to be worth considering. The stock's been pretty strong lately. They reported better than expected revenue because of their servers that are built for artificial intelligence work, and they've got a $3.1 billion backlog. By the way, Dell Technologies has a $3.8 billion backlog. So this whole area, to me, seems like a pretty obvious next move.
All right. And any thoughts on gold and silver? Gold, of course, hitting that record high not too long ago. Right now, just below 2,400 here, make that 2,374 here at the moment. Silver is back above $30 an ounce here at last check. Well, any thoughts on the precious metals here before we let you off the hook?
Well, they're both very attractive, I think. They've been long ignored. Silver has a dual character. It's used as a financial asset, and it's also got a very positive industrial application. The metal is a key ingredient in solar panels, and with all the growth in that industry, the silver is expected to reach a record again this year. And by the way, there's a shortage of silver, and so the industrial users are starting to drain the world's major inventories of silver, and then the central banks of the world want more gold because it's undervalued, in my view.
Do you say you think silver is going to hit a record high? That would put it above $50 an ounce then?
That'd take us back to the Hunt brothers' big squeeze of 1980, whatever.
That's right. I believe 1980 it was. Gabriel Wisdom, thank you very much for joining us live here. That is Gabriel Wisdom, Managing Director at American Money Management and author of Wisdom on Value Investing, live here this afternoon. Mottek On Money, 790 KBC. Folks, if you're hurt in an accident, you need an experienced advocate, and Clark Fielding and his team of sharks at Fielding Law are on standby, ready to dive into your case. My friend Clark the Shark is fearless for justice and your go-to attorney when injured in an accident that was not your fault. Whether it's a car accident, slip, trip, fall, or any kind of personal injury, Fielding Law is here to make sure you get the care, attention, and compensation you deserve. Fielding Law can assess the circumstances of the case, negotiate tenaciously with the insurance companies, and if necessary, file a lawsuit and litigate to seek fair compensation on behalf of you, the injured party. An injury is a major disruption in your life. Medical expenses, lost wages, pain and suffering, property damage, and other losses incurred as a result of that injury are all part of the damages. Don't try and handle the process alone. You need an expert in the process. The team at Fielding Law are the ones to trust. Put Clark Fielding's number in your phone under the word accident. That number is 833-88-SHARK, 833-88-SHARK, or go to clarkthesharklaw.com. 790 KBC welcomes Yachtly Crew. Yep. Nation's #1 yacht rock band coming to the Bank of America Performing Arts Center on November 9th. Tickets are on sale Friday at Ticketmaster.com. Right now, caller 9 wins at 1-888-795-2222. You can get a pair of tickets to the show if you are caller number 9. Furnished by Niederlander Concerts. Call right now, 1-888-795-2222. Caller 9 wins. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KBC, a record-shattering day for the stock market with both the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ settling at record highs. The S&P 500 moving up 63 at 5,354. The NASDAQ of 331 at 17,188, an all-time high. The Dow up nearly 100 today, up 96 at 38,807. A couple hundred points below its recent all-time high that we hit about a month ago. The price of gold pulling back slightly, down nearly $1 at $2,374 and change. Silver is above $31 an ounce, up 5 cents. Was up above 31. Now it's at $30.12 an ounce. Taking a look at NVIDIA, at a record high again today, up more than $60 at $1,224.40 an ounce. Checking the cryptos now, Bitcoin down 100 to 71,235. Ethereum down 17 at 3,848. And Doge at the moment at 16 cents. GameStop shares moving higher. Once again, the highest seen in 3 weeks. Looks like it's up more than $5 today at 31 and change. One of the meme stocks getting new attention lately. Tesla also getting a bit higher today at 175. Boeing making a move on the upside following the successful launch of the Starliner out of the Kennedy Space Center today. Boeing stock closing up $1.23 at $189.85. And now the latest news here on 790 KBC. Mottek On Money continues here on 790 KBC. Good afternoon. Let's get an update now on what's happening in the restaurant business. More tough news. Another big restaurant chain closing nearly 50 of its locations here in California following California's minimum wage hike impacting restaurants. Let's get an update on what's really happening with Angela Marsden, owner of the Pineapple Hills Saloon and Grill in Sherman Oaks, small business hero here in Southern California. Angela, thank you very much for taking the call here this afternoon.
Hey, Frank, how are you doing?
All right. We missed talking to you, and so great to have you back with us here, Angela. So take it from the top and give us your reaction to this latest news here with another chain closing a lot of locations here and a lot of restaurants feeling the heat.
It's Frank, I've been talking about this, and you know this, on your show since last January. You mean I spoke one-on-one with the mayor. I handed her 51% of the restaurants a list and names of those that were not going to get the restaurant revitalization grant, even though they had been promised it and they'd taken money out expecting it. We've talked about the minimum wage and how there's only so much room and margins in restaurants. Begging. I've begged the small business office, freeze the sales tax, freeze the minimum wage for a minute. Just let us get caught up. Let us get caught up from the pandemic. I don't know what it's going to take for people to actually take it seriously and to realize that corporations are going to own all the businesses, and big bar groups that have big funders are going to own all the businesses you're going into. In the heart of the community, the small businesses, which is what made, in my opinion anyway, when I moved here, what I loved about Los Angeles was the artist boutiques and the mom and pop restaurants. I mean, the LA Times has done two articles on it, one in December on, the year restaurants went to die, 2023, and another one of even 5-star restaurants that can no longer sustain. And people are going to keep falling. People are still carrying debt from COVID. I mean, I get on here and sometimes I get really worked up. Today I'm very solemn. I actually feel like crying because hearing what Fauci said, that's first of all, it's not unbelievable to me, because when I was shut down and told I could not even have people on my outdoor patio, and Mark Garagos had come on to represent me, he had studies from Japan. Remember when the pandemic hit, there were countries that were far ahead of us when the pandemic hit. So we could and I was watching them the whole time, because that's what you do as a business owner, to try to predict, and Japan had studies then that Mark had in his hands that proved outdoor dining was safe. And to hear Fauci just casually say it, the 6-foot distance thing just kind of appeared, right? It just appeared, and I think it was the CDC, and we never ran any studies. We never followed the science. We just went with it, right? You just went with a decision that bankrupt, and I hate, people think small businesses, they think people that have money. These are middle-class people trying to make a living. I remember being at KBC, and there was an elderly couple. The man committed suicide because he had lost both restaurants. He had worked his whole life, and he couldn't care for his wife and had killed himself. You know, mothers, a mother of a tattoo shop with 5 kids begging the governor to please let her open. She could not feed her kids. And we are still suffering today. It will take over a decade for restaurants and small businesses to recover. And all the money went to Main Street and all the big guys. 30% of the restaurants closed in LA from the pandemic, and that's not including the ones that have closed since and that will continue to close. I mean, I carry a $5,000 loan payment a month and will for 30 years, and that was with help. I got donations. I'm blessed. I have high quality problems, right? I don't know what wake-up call the mayor and the governor needs, but they need a board put together of small business owners that actually treat the business owners like human beings. We're human beings. The man I bought my outdoor tables from had a heart attack during COVID from the stress and almost died and had to sell his restaurant. I remember very clearly, Frank, another restaurant, a guy had jogged by and they had written on the window, I guess we weren't essential enough because they weren't allowed to open. And bars, nobody talks about bars. Bar owners that didn't have food were not allowed to open the entire time. And because they were not allowed to open, they couldn't continue payroll. And because they couldn't continue payroll, they were not eligible for the restaurant revitalization grant. This decision it's so irresponsible. We're going to charge somebody that drinks and kill somebody on the road because they're responsible enough to know they could kill somebody. And Fauci is up there acting, like he's the only man for science, telling us to follow the science, and they don't even do studies on the number one rule that destroyed our country, Frank. And what's bothering me is everybody's just going to go along with it, and nobody's going to hold him accountable. They're just going to go, well, let's learn from it. Let's learn from it. Everybody and their brother knows what science is, and science is you come up with a conclusion, right? And then you have an opposing theory. The people with opposing theories were called murderers. I was called a murderer for trying to stay open. We're called conspiracy theories because I wanted to save my business. I had tuberculosis and was working in it and taking risks. I did it, because I had to save my business, and I was, able to do that. I'm blessed. Most people couldn't. And are we all just going to be complicit and just say, look, we're traumatized. We don't want to go back to that period. Let's just learn from it and move on. Or are we going to start holding people accountable? Because this has devastated America. It has devastated California. And our people in California decided they wanted to take it a step further than Fauci, and they wanted to make it, they were trying to prove that they were as good as the CDC, and we're going to hold this out as long as possible. Our kids are mentally ill. Our children have killed themselves. They still are not back on track in school. The elderly people that own businesses suffered more than anybody, and they were committing suicide at astronomical rates, which nobody talks about. So I'm sad right now, Frank. Mm-hmm. I'm sad, and I'm a fighter. I always am a fighter, and I keep surviving until once I'm crushed, I'm crushed. But I will keep going until I can no longer go. But at what point does somebody say, why would I have a business in California? My health is declining. I'm fighting every day just to make, low income. Like, I don't understand why anybody, left or right or center, would want this to continue and would not be outraged from the damage that it has cost us. And again, there's still no reprieve. There's still they should be forgiving any loans that any small business has due to the disaster loans due to the pandemic. That's one step. They should be freezing sales tax for Californians right now. Give them some breathing room to get caught up on. I don't know. I'm not a politician, but I think it's like basic economics, right? It's just astounding me to Frank, and it's a sad day for me. It's a really, really sad day because I'm traumatized. I have PTSD from what I've been through, and I know every business owner does. And we want to just put it aside and think positive and think like things are going to be good. You try to think good thoughts, good things come in, and there is truth to that. But we also must speak out, and we must not forget we cannot forget the choices that were made, and there needs to be accountability. Lives were lost. Divorces happened. Businesses collapsed. We can go on and on about the devastation those three rules made. It pitted us against our neighbors. If you were getting too close to somebody, my God, you were getting ostracized from the person at the grocery store. But, Home Depot was allowed open. Costco was allowed open. Largest transfer of money from Main Street to Wall Street. And I hope that both sides, right, left, Democrat, Republican, can step back and say enough is enough. Enough is enough, and somebody needs to be accountable, because anybody taking basic science knows that you have to do the studies and the research. I mean, that's basic, right?
Angela, the whole audience is with you, and as always, thank you for laying it out. As we've noted here with you on this program, the science that was followed apparently was the political science. That was the science that was followed, and let's not forget that as well. And you command tremendous respect among all the business people here for not only standing up for yourself, but for other businesses here in Southern California for what you did when your place was closed and they had that catering set up right next to your place there at the time. And you did that video and, of course, burst on the scene and have been a voice of common sense and such a strong voice at that. And we so appreciate it, and always great to have you with us here. Wish we had more time, Angela, but we'll unfortunately have to stop there. But let's talk again very soon, okay?
Yep. You have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you. All the best to you, Angela Marsden.
Bye, L.A.
No, we're going to. Thanks a million. Thank you very much,
Bye-bye.
Angela. Thank you. Angela Marsden, owner of the Pineapple Hill Saloon and Grill in Sherman Oaks, live here, 790 KABC. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KABC. Turns out Americans are fed up with tipping. Americans have a negative view about tipping these days, including over a third now say tipping culture has gotten TOOC totally out of control. Joining us live now is Ted Rossman, Bankrate Senior Industry Analyst who specializes in credit cards, credit scores, and other personal finance topics, including, you guessed it, tipping. Ted, thanks very much for taking the call here this afternoon.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
All right, take it from the top and tell us about your latest survey on everyone's favorite topic, not tipping.
59% of Americans have a negative view about tipping. That includes 35% who say that tipping culture has just gotten out of control. That's up 5 percentage points from last year. One of the big things that people are annoyed about are those pre-entered tip prompts that we see at coffee shops and food trucks and elsewhere. They flip around the payment tablet and you're being asked to tip and you're not sure if you wanted to tip. I've seen some really outrageous examples of that, including a self-checkout machine at Newark Airport and a pick-your-own strawberry farm. It's things like that that are giving tipping a bad name.
Absolutely. And once that screen is flipped, sometimes they turn it around even before you have the service, right? So whether you tip or not could impact what kind of service you'll get.
That's right. That's annoying people. And then also inflation is really an elephant in the room, really with all things financial these days. But it extends to tipping because customers feel like they're paying high enough prices already, and they're reluctant to add on top of that. But it's also part of why businesses have their hand out, because they may be reluctant to raise prices any further. Their costs are up. They're looking for ways to subsidize their employees' wages. I mean, honestly, what a lot of tipping is about is pushing more of the cost burden on the customer. And it's kind of a hidden surcharge of sorts. And I do think that inflation is a big part of it, the pandemic aftermath. There was a time in 2020 that people were tipping more generously because of the pandemic, and that sentiment has really faded. Technology is another interesting aspect of this. It's easier than ever to solicit tips through payment terminals and tablets and apps.
All right, and given the choice of cash tip or credit card tip, usually, as we've heard in the past, when you're talking about credit card tips, it's usually higher than when people actually have to lay out the cash, right?
An interesting thing there is that people are carrying less cash. So there have been winners and losers to this. There are more tips being given digitally at the point of sale, but what about the valet and the bellhop and the doorman and people that you used to give a few bucks to, and now people don't carry those dollars? I've actually seen some hotels giving employees badges that have QR codes on them that you can scan and give a digital tip. Also, some hairstylists are taking to putting their Venmo ID or their Cash App cash tag on a sign next to their chair because people are carrying less cash. And some businesses frown upon credit card tips because they don't want to pay the processing fee. So if you don't have cash, maybe something like Venmo or Cash App is a viable substitute.
All right. And you mentioned at the beginning, people are upset about tipping self-service kiosks, right? Who are you even tipping these days? Sometimes you're tipping a robot or a machine.
Yeah, that was the example that I came across at Newark Airport with the self-checkout machine. The company says the tip goes to the workers who stock the shelves and play more of a security guard kind of role. But that to me feels like tip creep, as in, being asked to tip in a very unconventional setting. Even in conventional tipped places, though, like sit-down restaurants, only 2/3 of diners always tip. And that's down 8 percentage points from 2021. Similar drops for things like getting your hair cut or getting food delivered. The restaurant one is particularly interesting. Only 1/3 of Gen Zers are tipping every time they go to a sit-down restaurant. Only about half of millennials are doing so versus 78% of Gen X and 86% of boomers. There's a big generational divide when it comes to tipping.
And we just talked to a giant on the restaurant scene and small business scene here in the Los Angeles area, and that is Angela Marsden, who we're talking about nearly 50 locations of a chain, Rubio's, closing here in California, and cost of doing business here in California very, very high, and that's the main reason why they are closing. What are you hearing out of California these days?
There are unintended consequences. A big deal in California recently was that $20 minimum wage for fast food workers. And, I'm all for people making a living wage. I know California is super expensive, but this is part of why businesses are asking for tips, because they're looking for ways to supplement wages. And also the unintended consequence is if it's more expensive to attract and retain workers, companies may try to do more with less, whether that's just simply having fewer staff members or maybe using more automation. Like that's something a lot of quick service restaurants are doing, where you can order on an app or a tablet, or sometimes you can even pay on there. It's a way to kind of speed things up and have to pay fewer staff members.
Well, I wish you could flip the screen now so I can tip you 25%. Great job here tonight, Ted, with that great information. Ted Rossman, Bankrate Senior Industry Analyst, thank you very much for joining us live here this afternoon.
No problem. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Ted. And a record-shattering day for the stock market. Recapping the action today, the NASDAQ settling at a record high at more than 300 points, 17,188. The S&P 500 also at a record high of 63. The Dow closing up nearly 100 at 38,807. Stay tuned now for the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang, and I'll be back with more at 4 tomorrow afternoon on Mottek On Money, 790 KBC.
The Ed Milet Show showcases the greatest peak performers sharing their journey, knowledge, and thought leadership.
The more you just kind of play with your ability to visualize, the more it becomes a muscle. It'll serve you. But I'm telling you, life is a whole lot better when you focus on what's going on inside of you as opposed to what's going on around you. And the more we just get internal, we begin to take some measure of control over the mental images we're feeding ourselves, the more we can produce a result that's in congruence with our goals.
The Ed Milet Show is available on YouTube or wherever you listen.